I'm the man, I got the plan. When it hits the fan, do all I can, do all I can.
Hey guys, Christian the Haver Car Man coming back at you with another deck review, and this time we are looking at Cyber Dragons. But before we get into that, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below so you guys can stay updated on all of this channel's future content, including more videos like this, as well as some deck profiles, and hopefully in the future some meta-analysis. And while you're there, you might as well go and check out all the links down in the description below. Check out all the other channels I'm involved in, like Team Chaos Stream and the Coalition of Scrubs. And if you haven't heard of the Coalition of Scrubs yet, or you don't know what it is, it's basically another Yu-Gi-Oh channel that I'm a part of, where me and several other YouTubers get together to make you guys some awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content. I will also have each of the individual creators involved with that channel linked down there as well for you to go check out. Please go do that. They're all awesome creators with some amazing videos for you guys, and please go show them some love. They really deserve it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's deck review, once again on Cyber Dragons. So in normal deck review fashion, let's cover the pros and cons of this deck first before getting into the actual rating. So starting off with the pros here, this is a deck that can easily play a going second OTK build, and also has the potential to set up a going first board that sets up a couple of negates, and I think I've seen a couple of builds that actually go into True Cannonball Calamities. While I don't really approve of that build as much, it is still a possibility for this deck. This deck also runs a lot of easy combo starters, and is really easy to be able to pick up and play, and is also thankfully very affordable to pick up and play. I just picked up my deck for under $100. If you guys want to see a profile on that, be sure to let me know down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to do that in the future. And that's really all there is for the pros. Let's go ahead and move on to the cons of this deck. So starting off, this deck hates Ash Blossom Joyous Spring. It's probably its biggest enemy. It also falters to things like Dark Ruler No More, or just any sort of blowout cards like Evenly Matched or Lightning Storm. Provided you can bait the negate from the infinity, and while it can still do stuff going first, it doesn't do a whole lot going first. It's usually just setting up an infinity, maybe a couple other things, and passing. It's not really designed to be going first, it just has kind of the means. And the deck itself is also a fairly tight build. The engine is fairly compact, and there's not really all that much room for hand traps. You can still squeeze in about like 5 or 6, depending on how you build the deck. You can obviously adjust it to fit more if you really want, but you're going to be hitting a decent amount of the consistency and not really being able to build as much in terms of board states, which is obviously not very fun. Alright, so let's actually start digging into some of the numerical values of this deck, honestly my favorite part of the review, and we'll go ahead and start off, like always, with consistency. I'm going to have to give this one a solid 7 out of 10 for consistency, just because most of your plays, you really need to see the Cyber Dragon core in your hand, or a Galaxy Soldier with another light machine monster that you can pitch off of it for the plays. That's really what you need to be able to get started with anything, and even then the Galaxy Soldier is very limited in what it can do. It's more of an extender than an actual play starter. Things like Natcher and Hertz can also start plays theoretically, but they're not very good at it. They're usually only 1 or 2 ofs anyways. You're more so relying on that Cyber Dragon core to be able to get your plays started. Of course, normal Cyber Dragon can get your plays going as well if you're going second and your opponent already controls a monster. So Cyber Dragon can do some stuff for you. It's more so going to be that Cyber Dragon core 9 times out of 10 that's actually making your plays though. The nice thing is that Cyber Dragon core can be searched with Cyber Emergency, so it's like there's playing 6 copies of Cyber core in there, which is really nice. So there's not really much else to talk about the consistency. Like I said, it's pretty limited on the actual play starters, on like what you need to get going. Once you get going, you're usually fine. So moving on to the next part here, we're going to move on to the resistance of this deck, which sadly is only a 5.5 out of 10. I had to give this deck this rating because it really hates hand traps. It gets destroyed sometimes by an Ash Blossom if you Ash like the first thing you bring out. A lot of times they're not going to be able to follow up with that. I mean, maybe if they open up the Cyber Dragon core and a machine duplication, then they might still be able to make something because you're going to have to Ash one or the other. Nibiru, this deck is very easy to Nibiru, and it cannot play through that for the life of it. And really just like imperms and stuff, all those cards really hurt this deck. So hand traps in general, as long as you get even just one negate will like be able to disrupt the deck so much and stop it from making a lot of the plays it really wants to. I know there's probably a lot of people that are going to be disagreeing with me right now, but really the only protection I see from hand traps with this deck is things like Called by the Grave. That's really all there is going to be, because they can't even run the Trap Tricks or Flesia. They don't really have an easy rank 4 engine in this deck, so you can't run the Gravedigger's Trap Hole to stop things like the Nibiru or hand traps to protect yourself. So it really does kind of hurt playing this deck because it is hard to do things like that, and there's just not much it can do to stop itself from being hand trapped or being able to play through it very easily. I suppose technically things like Cyber Emergency can recycle itself if it gets ashed. Like, it has basically the specific clause in the effect in the event that it does get ashed to just bring itself back to the hand and be able to recycle it. So there is that, but this deck really, it can't play through that much. Like, most disruptions just kind of shut down this deck entirely. Now we'll go ahead and move on to the power of this deck. I gotta give this one actually a solid 9 out of 10. Cyber Dragons do output a very good amount of power, and this is because, once again, it was designed as a going second OTK deck, where you're pulling out stuff like Cyber End Dragon or Cyber Twin Dragon with fusion cards, like Power Bond if you're lucky enough to draw it, which will double their attacks, or you can do stuff like Overload Fusion to pull out any of your Chimera Tech monsters. They can get up to some pretty beefy numbers. It's mostly your fusions that are going to get you to the OTK stuff. You can also pull out things like Cyber Dragon Seeker that's going to give you an extra 2100 points of damage that really does a lot. And, you know, it's easy for this deck to pull out a lot of damage and just be able to OTK. Like, that, there's nothing really else to say about it. This deck is just an OTK machine, and I love that fact. Now, once again, you can still play going first. So you can set up a couple of disruptions and maybe stop your opponent so that the following turn you just push for game right there after they've had an attempt to set up their board. And you've kind of broken it along the way. So, power, general, 9 out of 10. It does a lot of damage. It's not always going to OTK, though, unfortunately. No deck is necessarily guaranteed to OTK, unless it's like a really, really dangerous deck that Konami really needs to address. Emancipator. But anyways, that's it for power. Let's go ahead and move on to the disruption of this deck. I am going to give this a solid 7 out of 10. It's not too impressive. Once again, an Infinity and maybe like another disruption or two pass is nothing too crazy to brag about. But it's not necessarily something to be upset about either, because it's more than Cyber Dragons were initially able to do when they first created the deck. It's actually grown a lot in power level since its conception, and it actually does a decent amount. It's not really going to be topping any events anytime soon, but we'll get more into that at the end here. And once again, it can only play a couple of hand traps because there's not that much main deck space for it, which is what a lot of the disruptions come from nowadays in this modern format. And, I mean, yeah, it can make the True King of All Calamities if you get the right build and you get the right cards, but that's not always a very consistent thing from what I understand. It's a very kind of a gamble play from what I remember, and it requires running a lot of stuff that kind of is outside of the normal Cyber Dragon strategy to be able to pull them out. And who knows, True King of All Calamities might very well get addressed on the next ban list coming in September now, I believe is when it's scheduled to release. Yeah, this is gonna be a fun 3 months in this Emancipator Eldritch format with just 3 Multi-Faker, 3 Necros of Unicorn, and 3 Canna Hawk. Why, Konami? Why? So the last main section that I want to talk about is the flexibility of this deck. This is, once again, only a solid 7 out of 10, because, once again, the play starters are usually roughly the same, and you're going to be playing roughly the same line of play. There are a few variations you can do in there. Once again, there's the stuff like the True King of All Calamities. I've seen some other ridiculous plays that people have thrown into this deck. It's a very interesting one to see people throw alternate strategies into when it's really only ever been like this pure strategy that just does a lot of damage and can set up a couple of negates going first to be able to leave itself open to push for game the following turn. It's kind of an iffy deck for flexibility for throwing other stuff in. The most versatile place this deck gets is the Action deck, especially when you get into stuff like your Chimera Tech Fleet Over Dragon, which can just steal your opponent's monsters from the extra monster zone and get a decently sized body. Some cases you can super poly, like if you're playing an Orcus deck and you have like a Chimera Tech over mega, or like just one of the Chimera Tech monsters in your action deck that just needs machine monsters and 1 Cyber Dragon. Yeah, you can use Super Poly there. It's just not a very flexible deck. There's not a whole lot that it does in terms of just going to different plays. It's usually going through the same line of play, which makes it fairly predictable and fairly easy to disrupt when you know what they're trying to do. So overall, I gotta give this deck a 7.1 out of 10 just because, once again, you're not going to be topping any major events with this. You're not going to be topping PPGs or YCSs or, anything like that. You're not going to be getting tops on any of those events with this deck just because it's more of a rogue strategy deck. And once again, it's nice that it's cheap and fairly easy to pick up and fairly easy to learn how to play. This is a good beginner's deck, I think, for getting into the competitive scene and just kind of learning the format. But outside of that, it's a fun deck. That's really all there is to say to it. This deck isn't going to be breaking any expectations and just setting boundaries for the power level of decks, it's kind of going to be that lower tier for a while unless it gets some crazy new support, which I doubt Konami's going to do anytime soon. But you never know. Konami does some weird things. Man list. You know, so, I mean, we're just going to live with it. It's, once again, it's a really fun deck. It's a really fun casual deck. I will say that much. Playing it casually is awesome. It can still do some stuff competitively. Once again, the most you're going to expect to do with this deck, though, is maybe win a locals. Like, maybe. So, that's all I got for this deck review today, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below if you play this deck or if you know a lot more about it than I do. Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I love chatting with you guys. These conversations are awesome, and it's really nice to be able to engage with the community I've created. You guys are all amazing people, and I'm very thankful for all your support so far on the channel. We're already like over 125 subscribers in just the first few months of this channel being a thing, and I really cannot express how grateful I am to you guys for that. So once again, thank you all so much for taking the time to support me and watch my content today. I love each and every single one of you, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Remember to have fun and make your move. Peace out.
I'm a love giver, such a